Well, hello everyone, how are you doing this fine day? Hope you're enjoying your week. Welcome to another survival challenge, in particular, an Invincible survival challenge. And I know, I sold out. I'm only making this video because it's big right now, and everyone's talking about it, and the algorithm's being friendly to it. I know. I'm just following the trends like everybody else. I'm not perfect. I'm sorry. Now, to narrow down the specifics, this challenge is going to cover the Invincible War as it is depicted in the Amazon television series, not the comics. If you have not seen the Invincible War episode that happens in season 3, maybe, perhaps, you should not be watching this video. I just think that would be a bad idea. Don't watch this video and then complain that there's spoilers. You should have known that from the fucking thumbnail. But before you click off the video, make sure to go down to the pinned comment where we have a link to the Discord, where we have everything from D&D sessions to art competitions to debate tournaments and everything in between. It's a fun time. And if you enjoy the video, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, and join the membership. Remember, you join the membership, you get videos early. But not wasting enough of your time, let's get started. So some people might be a little bit confused as to why I'm using the TV version of Invincible and not the comic book version of Invincible. And you know, it's an understandable curiosity. I'm sure there's a lot of comic book readers that are going to be a bit annoyed by that, but I'll give you two reasons. One, more people have watched the show than have read the comics. That's not the biggest reason, but that is a reason. The fact that the show version of the Invincible War plays out very differently than the one in the comic book, and more people are going to be aware of that version, is a pretty big reason as to why. But the biggest reason as to why is because the actual power levels of the characters in the Invincible comics, especially in the Invincible War, are very unclear in the comic in a way that they're not in the show. Mainly because of all the fucking crossovers that they throw in there. Within the Invincible War in the comics, Witchblade and Spawn show up and like participate in the war. This doesn't make any sense because if you look at how powerful Witchblade and Spawn are in their own series, they outdo anything that happens in the entirety of the Invincible storyline, even the most powerful characters towards the end of the series. Either one of them, Spawn or Witchblade, should be able to one-shot any of these marks during the Invincible War. It should be a very casual feat. They solo the entire universe. But when you have a crossover event, that's not particularly satisfying. So when you bring Spawn over, you want him to have a really good fight with people. You want to have Witchblade have a really good fight with people. Supreme shows up at one point in Invincible. You have Pit showing up. These characters would absolutely slaughter in Invincible. But because they're doing a crossover, they want all the characters to shine. It just makes sense for them all to fight a lot more evenly. But that also means you're going to have a lot of people arguing that the Invincible characters are stronger than they are because they can match these other characters that are significantly more powerful than them. When the truth is that those characters are getting depowered to be put into the Invincible universe, not that the Invincible characters are suddenly more powerful than they should be because they're capable of fighting against them. This is why comics become super hard to have these conversations with, because you can have a comic book story where Spider-Man fights evenly with Daredevil, but then another one where he fights evenly with Hulk. That doesn't make sense and should never happen, but it does, because they want the fights to be more even so it's more exciting to actually read about. In the show, since there's no crossovers, everything is just sort of existing within its own universe. That's not a problem. I don't ever have to argue that Mark's strength should scale up to this unbelievably powerful being because this being exists in this other completely different continuity where he did this other thing. That's just all off the table. It's just Invincible characters here. So to get to the actual purpose of this challenge, what is the Invincible War? What's the challenge all about? Basically, to give you a shortened version, there's this character named Angstrom Livy who in the Invincible universe has the power to travel to different universes. He travels to a bunch of different universes and picks up a bunch of different variations of Invincible, brings them all to the main universe of Invincible where our main character Mark lives, and then just releases them all into the world to just start devastating the planet. So the entire planet that Mark lives on and all of its superheroes have to fight back against, not an army, it's only 18, but 18 different Invincibles. Considering that in the Invincible universe at this time, Invincible is the strongest hero on the planet, this is actually a really, really massive threat. And that's it. I lied. That wasn't a summary. That's literally everything that happened. So the challenge won't be 18 different marks going into these universes and fighting the whole universes and all that. That's not what we're doing. It's literally just going to be these heroes are going to be the only heroes on the planet. The 18 marks are going to get thrown onto the planet at various places, different cities all across the world, and it will be these heroes' job to see how fast they can stop them before they just completely destroy the whole fucking planet, basically. So I guess you can kind of call it like a time trial challenge, where the heroes win by wiping out all the marks, but then you have to see just how much of the world they destroyed in the time it took them to do that, but they lose if they die or can't kill all the marks before the marks destroy like basically the whole planet. So the question that we have to answer right now is, how strong are these marks? And while it's kind of difficult to come to that conclusion, because they all seem to be kind of different power levels, like none of the two marks seem to be the same power. Some are clearly weaker than others. We do know that none of those 18 marks are as strong as Mark Grayson, because one, it's directly stated in the show that he's stronger than all of them, but also because all these 18 variants of Marks are versions of Marks that joined their dad Omni-Man in taking over the planet, which means they never went through the training arc with Cecil after our version of Mark said no to Omni-Man and he started training to prepare to fight against the Viltrumites. And we know from the beginning of season 3 that Mark's strength has increased more than double since he started training with Cecil. So all of these Marks that are coming in the variants should be around half the strength that Mark is, about 2/3 the speed of Mark. All of their stats should be less than Mark's. But we're going to use Mark as an absolute peak. We know they're not above him. I mean, a lot of people think that Sinister Mark is actually more powerful than the main Mark. That's the version that said he killed Omni-Man, but I don't buy it for a couple of different reasons. For one, there's no evidence that the Omni-Man in his universe was the same strength as the Omni-Man in the current universe. Also, 18 of these Marks were stuck on Earth for 3 days, and they only killed 100,000 people. We saw Omni-Man in season 1 easily, just by flying through a city, completely wipe it off the map, killing millions in a couple seconds. We also have no idea if Sinister Mark killed him in a fight or if he killed him in some other means, possibly poisoning or something else. I just don't think there's enough evidence here to say that that version of Mark was stronger than ours, especially not stronger than this version of Omni-Man, who could easily bring the entire world to its knees by himself. I mean, at one point in the Invincible War, Mark takes on 2 other Mark variants and does relatively well. He fights pretty evenly. The real issue he comes face to face with in that fight is that they're constantly trying to kill Eve while he's trying to fight, so he has to spend the fight kind of protecting her. But honestly, if it was just him versus them two, they make it pretty clear that he had a chance of winning that. So what exactly are Mark's stats? Well, they are extremely inconsistent. Yeah, I know I said the comics are like really inconsistent, that's why I'm not using them, but the show is better, just not like great. It's still super inconsistent. He's constantly said to be the most powerful hero on all of Earth, and he's shown doing unbelievably impressive things, but like he loses every fucking fight he gets in by characters who should be nowhere near his level. Like, based on his fights with other people, I honestly don't see why Cecil even thinks he's the strongest person. It really doesn't make any sense. Cecil should go down underground and get all those fucking bug things and get those to fight for him, because as of right now they do a way better job. Invincible couldn't fight against one underground bug monster. And don't give me this whole thing where Mark is trying to hold back and not hurt or kill the things he's fighting against. That's such utter horseshit. Look, me and my brother used to fight all the time. He doesn't stand a fucking chance. I got like 60 pounds on him. I would hold back while fighting him. He's never beaten me. He's not capable of doing it, whether I hold back or not. This idea that because he's holding back, suddenly the dude who he's significantly more powerful than will suddenly start beating the living shit out of him, that is not how holding back works. If he has a power level of 100 and they have a power level of 70, he can drop his power level to 80, still kick their ass and not kill him. But the show always has it so he's like holding back to the point that he drops his power level to like 60 or 65 and then he gets his fucking ass beat. Well, stop fucking holding back that much. A lot of these characters shouldn't even be capable of damaging him. It's very, very inconsistent, and they need to get a better grasp on just how strong Mark is and have him actually respond to the world as if he's as strong as he is, because the way people treat him doesn't really make sense. It's like he purposely holds himself back just enough to lose the fight. It's really weird. Having said that, despite that very bad writing, we actually do have a relatively convenient list of his abilities and like what he can do and how good he is at doing them. Because at the beginning of season 3, he goes through a training arc where they just straight up show what he's capable of doing. We see how fast he is, we see how strong he is, and yeah, we have pretty good measurements. In terms of speed, he's shown flying from Earth all the way to the moon and back in, it's kind of unclear how fast this is. It's not a second. It's not like a split second or even a couple of seconds. We see Cecil standing there for quite some time waiting for him. I'd say at fastest it's under a minute, but possibly a couple of minutes. I know a lot of people argue that he's FTL. Clearly in the show, he is not. Like, if he was even light speed, just equal to light speed, he'd be able to go from the surface of Earth to the moon and back in a split second. You wouldn't even see him leave. Like, light speed is extremely fast, and the moon's not that far away. In this scene, Mark is shown pushing himself so much that by the time he gets back to Earth, he is completely exhausted and just collapses on the ground. So this is very clearly the fastest he can go, and it's nowhere near light speed. So I'm just going to say, for the sake of argument, it took Mark a minute to fly to the moon and back. It is true that it could have been a little bit less or a little bit more. We're not actually sure. The show doesn't give us an exact measurement of how long it took him, but it was clearly more than a couple of seconds as Cecil was standing there waiting for a little bit, but I don't think he was waiting there for like 10 minutes. I think you can get away with saying it was 30 to 45 seconds, just as much as you can get away with saying it was 2 minutes long. But if it did take him a minute to fly to the moon and come back, how fast was he going? Already did the math. It's like 37,000 and something Mach. Comes out to 0.04% the speed of light, which is about 1/2500th the speed of light. So he's really, really fast, but he's nowhere near the speed of light. Having said that, he's actually not even really that fast, because that's only ever shown to be his speed when he's flying as fast as he can in a straight line. When we see him in actual combat, he's never shown to be faster than even bullets. He just fights normal dudes on par. He never really blitzes anyone. There's never a point where he moves so fast people can't register his movements. He really kind of moves the speed of a pseudo-normal person for the most part in actual fist fights throughout the show. I mean, shit, look at Cecil versus Omni-Man, where Omni-Man is trying to kill Cecil and he keeps teleporting before Omni-Man even gets to him. What, is he being teleported with AI that's like sensing he's in danger? No, we know from the comic book that's not the case. Someone is actually pressing a button to have him teleport to different locations. By the way, that dude needs a fucking raise, because that is some quick-ass reflexes, but not reflexes that are so fast that a human can't do them. This is also shown in season 3 when Mark tries to attack Cecil in the White Room and Cecil pulls out that little button thing and presses it and fucking with Mark's ear, stopping him. Mark was not able to blitz Cecil at that moment either. In fact, the only time he was able to blitz Cecil is after the fact, after Cecil already loses his weapon against Mark. So again, the characters in Invincible so far in the show have not been shown to be significantly faster than regular human reactions. They're definitely faster to some degree, but it's not to the point that they instantly blitz all humans everywhere. That's not shown. So this seems to only really register towards his flight speed, not necessarily his physical combat speed. As for physical strength, this one's arguably a little bit easier to figure out, as we can straight up just see what he lifts. At the beginning of season 3, we see him lift up this big ass glacier. That's a big fucking glacier. That's really big. That looks like a lot of weight. How much weight is that glacier? I don't know. I'm asking you. I'm not doing the fucking math on that. How much does that glacier weigh? Somebody do that. They also state that this is the heaviest thing on Earth that they could find for him to lift, and he successfully lifts it. So it's very possible that he can actually lift more than this. Later on, they actually design a weight bench for him that is specifically made to push his strength levels, where he benches an unknown amount of weight. In the comics, we actually do know how much this weighs. I believe they say that it's straight up 400 tons that he's benching, but I don't buy that measurement for the show, because this glacier is clearly far heavier than 400 tons. I've seen some measurements online that say that it's 100,000 tons. I don't buy that measurement either. That seems like way too much, but it's clearly more than 400. And considering that Mark is lifting this with his shoulders, and the weight that he's lifting when he's doing the benching is with his chest, which is a considerably stronger muscle than your shoulders, this being 400 tons is not believable. I think this is way more than 400 tons what he's lifting on the benching weight. In case you're someone who's watching this who doesn't work out, I suggest you stop watching this video and go work out. It's important that you do that. But also to give you an example of just how much stronger your chest muscles are than your shoulder muscles, when I was going to the gym, which it's been a while, it's been like a year, I'm way weaker than I was back then, but when I would go to the gym and do my shoulder, basically this exercise where you put a dumbbell in each arm and then you lift them over your head, very much so like Mark is doing right here, I would do about 45 to 50 pounds in each hand and 3 sets of 8 reps. But if I did a dumbbell press, which again is very similar to what Mark is doing in the show, he's doing a bench, not a dumbbell press. A dumbbell press is basically the same thing, except you have 2 different weights instead of 1 big bar. Anyway, when I would do those, I would do about 85 to 90 in each hand, and I would do 3 sets of 10 instead of 3 sets of 8. So in my case in particular, my chest is double what my shoulders are. So whatever this glacier is that he's lifting with his shoulders, he should be able to lift at least double that with a bench. So what he's lifting right here is easily heavier than 400 tons. I don't even think that's going to be close. So I think the comic is a bad representation to use in this particular aspect. But again, remember, the Marks that show up on the planet are significantly weaker than this version of Mark. This version of Mark is stated to have, in the last 3 months, more than doubled what his strength was at the end of season 2. So all of these Marks at bare minimum should be half the strength that Mark is. And really, that's kind of it. Mark doesn't really have any other notable powers in terms of combat except for strength and speed. We know his strength now, we know his speed now, that's really it. So at last, let's get to the actual challenge and finally find out how our heroes will do and if they can save the planet from the devastation of the admittedly small army of Marks that are destroying it. First up on the chopping block, we have Captain Sunshine from Venture Brothers. God, I love Venture Brothers so much. Such a good show. Easily the best show Adult Swim has ever made. And yes, I am also including Rick and Morty and the Boondocks, which are 2 shows that a lot of people often say are the best shows that Adult Swim made. Honestly, I don't even think I would put those in second place. I'd say second place is probably like Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law. That show's fucking great. Not Bird Girl. Don't watch Bird Girl. Bird Girl's a piece of shit. Or Moral Oral. Moral Oral would also really good. Fuck, dude. People sleep on Adult Swim. They had some good shows. They had some shitty things too, but they have some really good shows. Adult Swim's ability to just throw shit at the wall and see what works makes a lot of their shows really fucking fascinating. It makes some bad stuff, but it makes like some of the most unique shit you've ever seen, and oftentimes it's pretty good. Metalocalypse is another one. God damn it. People should watch more Adult Swim. It's fucking solid. So Venture Brothers, as far as I'm concerned, is the only series that I've ever seen that does the whole what would happen if superheroes were realistic sort of thing right. Like, I don't think The Boys do it right. The Boys is just like, they're all assholes, and okay? They don't really have anything to say that's really clever about society. They just make it shitty, and they're like, okay, that's society because society is shitty. Or even Invincible, to a large extent, Invincible's selling point is like, what would happen if these heroes were real in a more realistic world? But really all that translates into is a more violent series that's basically the same as Marvel or DC. No one has really done it right in the way that Venture Brothers does. And that's because Venture Brothers isn't trying to talk about society or make some greater statement that it can't actually do properly. The statement it's trying to make is about people, not society. The entirety of the Venture Brothers universe is not realistic. It's not trying to be. It is a very comic booky, cartoony kind of world. But what they do is they take all of these characters like superheroes and like Adventure Boy series like Johnny Quest and stuff, and they take it and they say, okay, what would happen if these people were real people and you put them through the situations that these comic book characters and Adventure Boys and like, you know, Scooby-Doo, the gang, there's an episode where they show up, or a variation of them show up. It's like, what would happen to these people if you put them through this situation again and again and again and again over the course of many, many years? What would that do to their mental state? And they've basically come to the conclusion that they would all be so fucked up mentally from all the stuff that happens. And this turns the show into kind of like a satire of comic books and just sort of nerd culture as a whole, but also makes a show that has really fascinating characters with really good arcs and pretty decent character studies of all these people. Like, the main character of the show is Dr. Rusty Venture, and he is based on Johnny Quest. When he was a kid, he was a boy adventurer whose father would drag him into all of these different crazy adventures with supernatural things and mad scientists and all kinds of crazy shit, right? In Johnny Quest, it was just like a fun 1980s show where Johnny would always like solve these problems with his dad and the little like Indian boy, and everything would just kind of be fun and lighthearted. The characters of Johnny Quest couldn't be real people. If they were, it wouldn't work out this way. In the Venture Brothers, it's like, okay, well, what if they did that, but they were real people? So Rusty Venture is just like a normal dude, like a normal little kid whose father is dragging him around the world, putting his life in danger on a daily basis. And the conclusion that the writers of Venture Brothers came to is that Rusty Venture's father was unbelievably self-centered and uncaring about the life and well-being of his child, dragged him around all of these things for his own benefit, and Rusty became so psychologically damaged by constantly getting kidnapped and shot at and drowned and having all these different crazy things happen to him throughout his life that by the time he got into his adulthood, he's just completely mentally fucked. He's a self-serving, cowardly, egotistical maniac who's basically a sociopath at this point, and it's almost entirely due to just massive amounts of mental trauma. And this goes for the mass majority of characters in the show. There's a family in the show based on the Fantastic Four that goes over what would happen if a scientist doctor dude really dragged his family all the way up to space and then got them all horribly fucked up by some crazy space magic bullshit that hit them all. There's even a major character in the show that is a henchman to one of the main villains, and we get to see what kind of person you would have to be to become a henchman of a villain who does not give a fuck about your life, and what it does to you to constantly get thrown at heroes just to get beaten, and seeing all of your friends and everybody around you constantly getting killed by the heroes as the guy who you work for just straight up doesn't give a shit. And that's one of the best characters in the whole show. Henchman 21 is awesome. It's such a good fucking show. And Warner Brothers canceled it to give us more reality TV shows. Fuck. So what can I say about Captain Sunshine? Well, a lot. But there's one particular thing I want to touch on first before we get into any of that, because people have a massive misunderstanding of this character. A lot of people seem to think that Captain Sunshine is a pedophile. He's not a pedophile. Please stop calling him a pedophile. They make it very clear in the show that he's not a pedophile. It does a massive disservice to the pretty decent character writing that they've done for this guy. So just to explain to people who haven't seen Venture Brothers and are probably fucking lost with me talking about pedophiles and shit. There's an inside joke within the show that all of the characters believe Captain Sunshine is a pedophile. They constantly reference that he's a pedophile. They constantly make little comments to each other, be like, yeah, he fucks boys, yeah, for sure. But that's not actually true. That's just what people think, because he acts very strangely around his Wonder Boy. He acts very weird around Wonder Boy. But the show makes it clear that he's not. In fact, there's one point where the Monarch goes up against Captain Sunshine, and then he starts like mocking him for wanting to fuck little boys and wanting to fuck Wonder Boy. And Captain Sunshine is so disgusted by the idea, like it really starts to bother him to the point that Monarch starts winning the fucking fight, because Captain Sunshine starts like having a mental breakdown at the idea that he would ever molest Wonder Boy. His relationship with Wonder Boy is very strange, but there's a reason for it. So Captain Sunshine is essentially an amalgamation of Superman and Batman fused together, and is voiced by Kevin Conroy, by the way, which, yes, that is exactly as awesome as you think it is.
Captain Sunshine?
Got a thing for torturing young boys, don't you? Well, you're not fighting a boy now.
And essentially, years and years and years ago, he had a sidekick known as Wonder Boy, who was like a little kid. This kid died while they were out doing their whole superhero thing. Because of this, Captain Sunshine had a mental breakdown. He blames himself for the death of Wonder Boy, and it caused him serious mental and emotional trauma. In order to fix his mistakes, he is constantly going out and searching for a new Wonder Boy to replace the old one that he feels bad about getting killed. So he's constantly out looking for new little boys to be the new Wonder Boy, and then he starts treating that new little boy as if he was the old Wonder Boy. It's very creepy and it's very weird. He's done this several times, and when the new Wonder Boy also dies, this makes his trauma even worse. This has been going on for a long time because Captain Sunshine doesn't age. He's been a superhero for over 60 years straight, and he's had several different Wonder Boys, and they keep dying. When he gets a new Wonder Boy, he is not only overly affectionate, but also overly protective over them, because every time a Wonder Boy dies, it just causes more pain to him, and he's constantly reminded that he's getting all these fucking boys killed. But he has to fill that void to make himself feel better. So it's this really fucked up circle of him trying to fill the void in his heart that Wonder Boy left by being killed, but by doing that, he's getting more boys killed, which is making it worse. You see what I'm saying? And honestly, it just doesn't fit Venture Brothers' style of writing. If you were to say that Captain Sunshine's a pedophile, you would only be saying that because of like little jokes and implications here and there by other characters, kind of alluding that he might be a pedophile, but that's not how Venture Brothers writes its story. There is a legit pedophile in the story, and they openly talk about it and make jokes about it. Sergeant Hatred is a straight up pedophile. He talks about being a pedophile. It's turned into a massive joke that he's a pedophile. His girlfriend, Princess Tiny Feet, they say straight up that the reason why he's attracted to her is because her feet look like kids' feet. It's super fucking creepy and weird. And he's like a really funny character. If Captain Sunshine was actually a pedophile, for one, that would be two different pedophiles on the show, and they'd be doing the same joke over and over again. But also, they wouldn't imply it. They would just straight up say it, because they literally say it for Captain Hatred. Like, he openly talks about how he fucks kids.
Just so I can buy a beautiful brown little boy girl to keep in my room for when the urges come.
This show is not in any way worried about censoring itself or offending the watchers. It just does whatever it wants to do. It's a great fucking show. Go watch it. So to get to the actual point of the video, how would Captain Sunshine do if you threw him into this world? Well, he's not going to do very well. Captain Sunshine's powers are very simple. He has super strength, super durability, he flies, and he can shoot solar rays at people that can immediately burn people's skin. He also uses it to burn people's eyes and blind them permanently. That might be kind of useful against the Marks, but then again, maybe not. The Mark that we know was able to fly into the mouth of a volcano, and it didn't like burn his eyes or melt his eyes, so I don't see why solar radiation would. While it's true that Captain Sunshine in his own universe is the physically strongest and fastest, most durable, and nobody can really hurt him unless he's drained of all his solar energy, being the most powerful character in the Venture Brothers doesn't really mean a whole lot, because the Venture Brothers level of power is so much small. Like, no one ever destroys like a whole building or a city block or lifts a mountain or anything like they just don't have that level of power. Captain Sunshine's best feat is just like beating on regular human dudes and like slightly enhanced human dudes and them not being able to hurt him. So No, I think he would probably be immediately wrecked by the first mark that he came into contact with, because literally no one in his universe is that strong, other than, I guess, him sort of technically. But, like, we don't know his top feats because he's never challenged. And because he's not challenged, we can't give him a maximum strength level. But we can't even give him really, like, a minimum strength level because he doesn't, like, lift anything or destroy anything. He just beats up some people and blinds them and shit. It's very simple stuff. He doesn't stand a chance. He loses. He goes up against the very first mark. That very first mark fucks him up, and it's over. Super, super one-sided. Next up on the list, we got Captain Planet, this motherfucking tree-hugging hippie communist bitch. So this one actually really, really surprised me. In case you're not aware, before I post my videos on YouTube, I'll go into Discord and I will post basically like an advert saying that this video will come out and say when it comes out and all that different kind of stuff. I do it on the YouTube community too, but the Discord I do it a lot earlier, and it gives people opportunity to theorize. They'll usually talk about their favorite characters in general and say who would win and how well they'll do and all that kind of stuff. You get it. What surprised me is that after I posted this in the Discord, a lot of people there had absolutely no idea who Captain Planet was. I wasn't aware that this was a character that kind of left the public zeitgeist. I don't think I know anyone in my real life that doesn't know who Captain Planet is. But I guess it sort of makes sense because the character came out in 1990 and it only had like 2 seasons and that was it. And there hasn't been any reboot shows or sequel series or comic books in the same way that there was for something like He-Man that was out even earlier. But I don't know, I just found that weird. I thought everybody knew Captain Planet. Captain Planet is a series about a group of teenagers, all of different races and from different countries and nationalities, each of which wields a different ring that gives them some kind of power over some element, and one that gives them power of heart for some reason. Okay, that's kind of gay. Every episode they'll come face to face with some kind of new challenge. In order to overcome that challenge, they put all their rings and powers together to summon a superpowered eco-terrorist that then goes around and assaults people and destroys private property and commits acts of eco-terrorism. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like he's pure evil. He's not like the worst guy ever. Sometimes he'll go after poachers who are purposely hunting down endangered animals for money, or maybe he'll attack some factory that's dumping toxic waste into some poor town's nearby water supply. Like, he does do good things, but oftentimes he'll just show up and destroy a bunch of oil fields because oil is burning fossil fuels and bad for the environment, but he doesn't even question, like, who is utilizing that oil? What people aren't going to have power that night because you just got rid of their power supply? There's episodes where he shows up and just starts destroying shit to stop lumberjacks from cutting down wood that they'll need to use to burn to get through the winter. At one point in the series, he ripped an entire nuclear power plant out of the ground and chucked it into the sun. He didn't even check to see if anybody was working there. He just chucked it. Nuclear power is like the cleanest power that we have. There's an overpopulation episode in this show where the characters positively talk about China's 2-child policy. They directly stare at the children watching this show and tell them that they should have less or no kids. Otherwise, the whole planet's gonna come to an end.
This city's growing too fast. It's just not safe.
Maybe there are just too many people in one place.
If the number of people on our planet keeps growing the way it is, soon there will be too many people everywhere.
I think everyone should have fewer children. In some countries, the government recommends that a couple only have 2 children.
Recommends? Are you fucking kidding me? You know Tim Turner, the guy who made the fucking show, has 5 kids, right? Fuck you. And fuck this show. Fun fact, when this episode aired back in the 1980s, there was only 5 billion people on the planet. Environmentalists started using this whole overpopulation is gonna cause an apocalypse scenario argument in the 1960s when there was only 3 billion people on the planet. You motherfuckers have been pushing this argument for 80 years. Terrible politics aside, Captain Planet is just straight up not a good person. At absolute best, he's an incredibly misguided, superpowered person who uses violence to force his political ideologies on other people. Not the best. It's not like he shows up to the, fossil fuel burning people. And then he's like, look, I get it. You're providing power to people who need power, but can we maybe go about this a different way? Let's find an alternative, something that's not so destructive for the environment, so that we can kind of fix the world without screwing over all these people. But that's not what he does. He just shows up and blows shit up and assaults people, which to me brings him from the noble hero the show thinks he is to a very misguided eco-terrorist who borders on sociopathic. You know that Don Cheadle skit they had years ago, where they actually had Don Cheadle playing a psychopathic Captain Planet? People who didn't know anything about Captain Planet Planet, watch that skit and it's still funny. But if you have watched Captain Planet and then you go watch that skit, it kind of makes it more funny because you can see that, yeah, this is kind of the type of person Captain Planet would be if he was in the real world and not a kid's show where everything is black and white. Because in reality, the things that Captain Planet does in the show would seriously fuck up so many innocent people. And he endangers a lot of people's lives for the good of the environment.
Hey, all you Planeteers at home. Remember, turn off the faucet between usages and recycle those plastics. Or else, I'll turn you into a fucking tree. Captain Planet, motherfucker.
I genuinely think that Captain Planet would be a fascinating character if he was written for adults and not for children. He would basically be like a Godzilla that can kind of like talk to people and has like a character, you know, more so than, I know Godzilla has a character, but like more so than just a giant lizard. Like he's a dude who sees the world in black and white, who's just like, yeah, we do whatever we can for the environment. It doesn't matter what we sacrifice in order to do that. It would be a guy who you can kind of see as maybe a good dude, but who's doing things in the most destructive means. I don't, it could be an interesting character. So how would Captain Planet do if he had to defend the world from the Invincible War? Truth be told, I'm not 100% sure he would care. Captain Planet's not a superhero. His goal was never to go out and solve crimes. He never stopped bank robberies or murders or anything even close to that. He was a political activist that used violence in order to stop the things that he wanted politically. It was always like environmentalism or racism or whatever were the popular left-wing talking points at the time. There were some instances where that wasn't the case. Like, for instance, they did an episode on gang violence where he actually came out and tried to stop two separate gangs from killing each other. And you can refer to him in that situation as possibly a superhero. But for the most part, that wasn't really his thing. So the only reason he would even give a shit about all the Invincibles destroying shit is if they somehow affect the environment while they're doing it, which it's definitely possible they will do on accident while they're just destroying shit, because if you go around destroying whole cities, it could be very easy for you to get to the point where you're accidentally destroying the environment as well. So maybe that might get him involved, possibly. But for the most part, like I said, he might not even care. In fact, based on the whole overpopulation episode, he might just fucking let it happen. Now, having said that, if Captain Planet does decide to fight against all the marks, how will that actually go? Will he be able to beat them? Yeah, probably. His fastest feat is being able to fly around the entire planet 3 times in like a couple of seconds, which isn't as far of a distance as Mark did. Mark going to the moon and back was 477,000 miles, and going around the planet 3 times is closer to like 70-something thousand miles. But he did it in a couple of seconds, and Mark didn't do it in a couple seconds. He did it in like a minute or two. So I think you can argue that it's possible that Captain Planet is faster, at least in terms of travel speed, but not so much so that he completely blitzes. It's close enough. And again, for him, this is usually shown as travel speed, not necessarily combat speed. He's not shown to just blitz everybody or anything like that. So I think a fight between him and Mark in terms of speed would be relatively even. In terms of strength, it's not. He threw an entire nuclear power plant to the sun. It flew from Earth to the sun in a couple of seconds. And that's over 100 million miles away. I don't even know what that would be. Like, how hard would you have to chuck something for it to fly that far that fast? If you did, the entire nuclear power plant would turn into ash before it even got to the sun because of just sheer speed and the force that it's flying. Lifting up that glacier for a little bit is nowhere near this. Not only is the nuclear power plant likely much, much heavier than that glacier is, but he also didn't hold it up. He chucked it into the fucking sun. Yeah, no, he's stronger. Not even close. He would absolutely overpower all the marks. So you'd think, okay, Captain Planet wins. He's clearly much, much stronger. Well, he is stronger, but he actually probably won't win. And the reason for that is he needs the Planeteers in order to exist. If any of the marks notice that he's summoned by the Planeteers, or notice the Planeteers' rings give him power or anything like that, they can just kill all the Planeteers, who are just regular basic bitch human people, and they just solved their Captain Planet problem. The marks in the show are shown to be pretty dumb, so they might not come to this conclusion, but they are often shown just recklessly massacring a bunch of human people just because they enjoy doing it. And it's gonna be kind of hard for Captain Planet to hide the fact the Planeteers are with him when they have a fucking shirt with his symbol on them and are following him around everywhere. It won't be that difficult for them to realize that they're connected in some way. They might not do it because they think it's his weakness. They might just do it because they know that they know each other and they'll do it as a way to possibly get on Captain Planet's nerves or make him open up for an attack by distracting him by attacking someone he knows. Point is, the Planeteers are probably going to get murdered, and without them, Captain Planet just fucking dies. Now, there are a ton of powers that Captain Planet and the Planeteers have that would actually instantly eliminate the marks, but they're never shown to actually use them on people, most likely because it's a kid's show and they don't want to brutally murder people, you know, on screen, I guess. They just want to imply that people were brutally murdered by, like, chucking fucking whole buildings into the sun without emptying it out first. Like, for instance, the Heart Ring is actually shown being able to control the minds of people. And since Captain Planet has the combined powers of all of the different rings, he should also have the power of mind control, but he's never once used it in the show. Another good power that he has is matter manipulation. He's shown being able to transform certain things into certain other things, but he never uses it on anyone who's living. He only uses it on objects. Another really useful power he has that's going to be super useful on him surviving fighting, even though he doesn't really need it, but not necessarily super useful on killing the marks, is that he can actually turn into any element. So he can turn into like electricity or metal or fire or water or whatever, which means that marks actually won't be able to harm him. So yeah, their only real way of defeating him is killing the Planeteers, but killing the Planeteers is going to be super easy. So yeah, overall, it's very possible that Captain Planet won't even do anything, but if he does decide to do anything because suddenly he decides that, you know, the world's not overpopulated and human lives do have some kind of value over the planet, which completely goes against his character, in all likelihood, all the Planeteers will be murdered, and then he'll just get depowered and basically cease to exist, because without them, he can't. And that's the end of that. Next up on the list, we have Superman from the DC animated universe. And this is one of the rare cases where this surprised me just as much as it's going to surprise you. I thought Superman would do way better than this. I thought he'd be the last people on the list. But after kind of thinking about it and revisiting a lot of the scenes that happened in the show, I came to the conclusion that's not the case. No. This is shockingly the most even fight on this list. If you put DCAU Superman up against like Mark Grayson right now, that would actually be a relatively good fight. Mark's not completely outmatched here. So let's go over what exactly Superman can do. Once again, while we know all the crazy Superman powers Superman has, like freeze breath and lasers and stuff, that's not going to be what brings Superman over the top to overcome the 18 Mark Graysons. It's really going to be his strength and speed. So how fast is he? How strong is he? How durable is he? You get it. As far as flying speed goes, there's no debate. He is considerably faster. He oftentimes flies to the sun and flies back, even in the DC animated universe, relatively quickly, like less than an hour. He's very fast. He's also capable of flying to other planets. While Mark is capable of flying to the moon and back, which is about 477,000 miles in, let's say, a minute or 2 minutes or 30 seconds, whatever, that's pretty fast. Flying to the sun and back is a whole different animal. You're talking about 477,000 miles compared to almost 200 million miles. If Mark flew from the Earth to the sun and back at the same speed that he went to the moon and back, which, remember, is his absolute max speed, and by the time he got back to Earth, he was so exhausted he collapsed, it would take him 7 hours to do it. But again, he's shown to not be able to do that because he's pushing himself to his absolute most extreme and he tired himself out in a minute. When we look at Superman, he's capable of doing that casually without getting tired and way less than 7 hours. We've seen Superman travel outside the solar system to totally different parts of the galaxy in like a day or two. He is way, way faster in terms of flying, not even close, but it ain't FTL speeds. And you might be arguing, no, that's bullshit. It is absolutely FTL. If he's traveling to a whole other star system, yes, it's FTL. But no, it's not. For one, we don't know how the DCAU is structured and how far away planets are. That's for one. If you're comparing it to our universe, sure, it would have to be FTL. But that's not necessarily the case for DC. And we already know generally how fast Superman goes because they establish it in both Justice League and Superman the Animated Series. In Superman the Animated Series, Superman races Flash and they tie. Later in that same episode, they are forced to team up and Flash ends up going faster than he ever did during their initial race. Superman then says, "What the hell, you were holding back during our race?" And the Flash says, "Of course I was. It was a charity event. I had to make it close to make it more entertaining for people." Superman then challenges Flash at the end of the episode to a real race, which we don't see the ending of, but it's made pretty obvious in the episode that Superman was going to lose since they tied initially when Flash was holding back and Superman wasn't. It is then confirmed later on in an episode of Justice League that yes, Flash is indeed faster than Superman. So how fast is Flash? He straight up says it. In one episode he's fighting Sinestro, and Sinestro mocks Flash by basically telling him, my ring can fire attacks at light speed and you move at light speed, so I can actually hit you. And Flash says, yes, that's true, but you don't think in light speed like I do. And then the Flash beats him up. The Flash confirms in this episode he moves at light speed. He later on in a future episode actually surpasses light speed, but that's way later. He has to push himself. It almost kills him. Generally speaking, his normal speed is light speed. So Superman can't really be at light speed in this show. Otherwise, it creates a contradiction here. So the only explanation for this is that the planets that Superman is shown flying to have to be close enough that he can get there in a reasonable time without actually going light speed. The universe isn't necessarily smaller than our real world universe, but it's definitely more congested as far as planets go and solar systems and stuff like that. So yeah, Superman shouldn't be light speed, but he should be pretty fucking close to light speed. Either way you put it, he's a lot faster than Mark is. I don't necessarily think it's gonna be that helpful for him though, because much like Mark, even though he flies that fast, he's never shown like moving and reacting that fast. When he gets into fights and punches people, he's not blitzing and completely outmatching people in terms of speed. They're not like not seeing him move as he just like instantly obliterates a whole room of people. That never happens. So I think you could pretty easily say that his flight speed is quite a bit slower than his just normal bodily movement speed. And while Superman is shown dodging lasers that are being shot at him, it's kind of back to the whole Flash situation. He's dodging people who are shooting lasers at him, so he's reacting to the people. It's like how Flash was able to overtake Sinestro because he's like, yeah, your lasers are traveling at light speed, but you don't think at light speed, so I don't have to outreact your lasers, I just have to outreact you. Superman can basically just do the same thing. He just has to outreact the people who are firing the lasers. Ergo, he doesn't have to be light speed in order to dodge the lasers. Anyway, overall, we don't really have a combat speed for him, but he is shown combat-wise to be outsped by characters who are not shown to even really be speedsters. So I'm just gonna say combat speed-wise, he's probably similar to that of Mark. In terms of strength, there's no question, Superman is considerably stronger. He's shown capable of lifting up an entire skyscraper, as well as lifting up a cruise liner and all kinds of shit that Mark's never been shown being able to do. I mean, he was struggling up lifting up that glacier, and that's nothing compared to a fucking skyscraper. I mean, in the show, Superman lifts up all of the Daily Planets. The Daily Planets is one of the tallest skyscrapers in Metropolis. The average skyscraper in New York City is 50 stories. Metropolis is very clearly inspired by New York City, so you can assume that the average skyscraper in Metropolis is around there, but considering that the Daily Planet skyscraper is one of the tallest buildings, I mean, you could probably go higher, like 70 or 80 stories most likely. I mean, the tallest skyscraper in New York City is over 100 stories. I'm not gonna say the Daily Planet's the tallest, but it's definitely one of the tallest in Metropolis. I think 70 or 80 stories is probably a pretty fair measurement, and that is so much more than that fucking tiny ass glacier. It's not even close. Now, I have heard some people say that DCAU Superman is like star level or some shit, and the reason why they say this is because of that movie that came out that was like Superman versus the Furious 5 or Fast 5 or the fucking something 5. It's some Fiendish 5. I don't know. I forget. It's a fucking F word and 5. That movie. But I'm gonna be honest with you, that is really, really stupid. The reason why they think this is because there's this thing that they use in the movie, this eye thing, and the whole idea is that they throw the eye into the sun, it detonates, and then it starts to pull the sun apart, and this thing is capable of destroying the sun. So Superman tries to stop it, and then when it goes off, Superman gets blasted out of the sun. And they say, well, that thing was going to destroy the sun, so the fact that Superman is alive after getting blasted out means that he should be durable enough to take the sun, I guess. But that's stupid. That's not what happens. The thing doesn't explode. If that little pulse that happened out of the thing that flew Spider-Man out of it was star level, it would have destroyed the sun. But it didn't. It didn't hurt the sun at all. It just activated, created a pulse. Superman gets launched out of the sun, and then it starts doing this thing where this energy starts leaking from it, and it surrounds the sun, and then it's gonna pull it apart by basically having like this force that pushes outwards. But it hasn't happened yet, because the sun is still there and it's not destroyed. Starboy stops it beforehand. He stops it by dropping into it, because Starboy has the power of gravity. He can basically increase gravity anywhere. So he throws himself into the center of the star and then increases the gravity where that little eye thing is. And this makes it so that it basically fights back against the whole pushing force that's gonna push the sun apart. And then he just like kind of cancels it out with his gravity powers, and he sacrifices himself and he dies. But Superman didn't stop this eye. He didn't push back against this force. He didn't do anything. He just tried to grab it, didn't make it in time, it activated, and he got flung out of the fucking sun. What? We're not even clear the thing damaged him. It just pushed him away. Like, this is not a star feat. You guys are reaching, man. Especially considering that the most powerful feat we have before this is the skyscraper thing. That's a pretty fucking big jump for nothing to have happened to make him that strong comparatively. Now, there are a couple more things that we have to go over other than just his physical abilities that I just thought of while I was in the middle of speaking. One being Superman's fighting ability is way better than anything Mark is capable of. Like, he's a really good fighter. We see Superman fighting against some of the greatest martial arts fighters, and not even martial arts, like Wonder Woman, who was a warrior for thousands of years, trained since birth to be one of the greatest warriors of all time. He's capable of fighting against her on par, even when their strength is relatively similar. When he has his powers stripped away, he's shown being on par with Batman in terms of fighting ability. During the Warworld episode, where he was greatly weakened, he is thrown in a coliseum to fight against some of the universe's most skilled fighters, and he wins and becomes champion of the arena. Superman in the DC animated universe is a totally different level of fighting skill compared to anything that even exists in Invincible up to this point in the show. None of them can fight like he does. So honestly, even if he wasn't considerably stronger than all of these Mark variants, he would still probably be able to overcome them. But as of right now, we see a strength superiority, a speed superiority, although not necessarily a combat superiority, and a fighting skill superiority. So can Superman overcome the Mark variants? Yeah. He could probably overcome 2 or 3 at a time, to be honest with you. The only thing that's going to be holding him back at all is his reluctance to kill people and to use his strength to its fullest. But unlike a show like Invincible, where when Mark holds back, he gets his fucking ass beat, Superman, usually speaking, doesn't. It does happen sometimes. Like I say, it never happens. But generally speaking, when he holds back, it is not to the extent that he just gets completely fucking throttled, unless he's fighting someone who's actually capable of throttling him if he holds back, like someone who he needs to fight at full power, but doesn't. But you also have the fact that the DC animated universe Superman does not have a no-kill rule. He has a no-kill guideline. Like, he doesn't want to kill people. He tries to avoid killing people, but it's not something that he, like, will never do. There's multiple cases in the DC animated universe across all the shows where he has no issues with killing people. Just to give you a couple of examples of some of the darker shit that he's done, he tried to lobotomize Doomsday. I'm not talking about the alternate version of Superman. Yes, that version did lobotomize Doomsday, but after Cadmus picked up Doomsday and then Doomsday like healed and came back, and Superman tried to stop him, like our version of Superman tried to stop him, he tried lobotomizing him again. It didn't work this time because he adapted to that, but he did attempt it. This Superman is willing to fucking lobotomize his enemies. At one point in Justice League, Superman wanted to go after Darkseid. Batman said no, and he warned the Justice League to not let Superman come face to face with Darkseid, because if he did, he would kill him. And this is shown correct. Superman stays behind on purpose, allowing himself to be trapped on Apokolips while the rest of the Justice League goes back to Earth, specifically so he can murder Darkseid. This doesn't work because they open up a portal at the last minute and suck him in, and he gets furious that they butted in and did not let him murder this guy. He also tried to murder Mongol. There are several instances where he tries to murder people. Like I said, it is something he most of the time tries to avoid, but he in no way has a no-kill rule. And if Superman has to fight 18 marks that are spread across the entire planet, killing hundreds of thousands of people, you better fucking believe Superman is not going to let that happen. If he has to kill someone, he's gonna do it. But honestly, I don't think he necessarily does have to kill someone. I think he could pretty easily knock most of them out relatively quickly. I do think you're gonna have thousands of people die, possibly tens of thousands of people die, but Superman can beat up the Mark variants relatively easily and travel between Mark variants also very, very quickly. So I don't know, it might take, 45 minutes for him to beat all 18 of the Mark variants? That's not too bad. I mean, a lot of lives will be lost, but he still wins. Last up, but certainly not least, we have the Powerpuff Girls. And yeah, I know this isn't really fair because I have 3 characters in this slot, and all the other 3 had only 1 character, but it would be weird to not use all 3 of the Powerpuff Girls. Like, what would I pick? Blossom, because she's the physically strongest? I don't know, it seemed odd to separate them, so we're just gonna do all 3. And if it's not fair, whatever. I don't really think Superman was all that fair, to be honest with you. So originally there was this guy named Professor Plutonium who wanted to have kids, specifically little girls. Kind of weird? Okay. But because he was an incel, he couldn't get a date, so he decided to just make them in his lab by just throwing a bunch of random items into a fucking tub and just hoping that girls come out of it. Okay. This somehow fucking worked, and he created 3 daughters, and these 3 daughters were the Powerpuff Girls. who were like super powered little girls who then became heroes over Townsville, which is not a town, it's a actually rather large city. Okay. And it was polluted with all sorts of monsters and creatures and Satan for some reason. And they would just go around beating people up and saving the day. And you know, it's a Powerpuff Girls show. It's a good show. Check it out. So not all the time, but sometimes when I make these types of videos, I'm curious of what other people think how powerful these characters are before I start to talk about it. So I started to look it up. Because, you know, sometimes it's just fun to tell people they're wrong. And I looked up the Powerpuff Girls and surprise, surprise, they're wrong. So it seems like most people think that the Powerpuff Girls are FTL. And I guess they are kind of barely FTL, but not for the reasons that people think that they are. So I went and I looked up, okay, why are they FTL? And what people started looking at was this episode, I'm forgetting the title of the episode, but basically it's the episode where they make this giant disco ball and they block out the sun so that all these like groovy 1960s and 70s monsters can come out in the dark because the sun like makes them turn to ash and they can just live freely out in the open as long as this disco ball is blocking the dark. And at some point during the episode, the Powerpuff Girls have to fly to the disco ball, fuck it all up, get rid of it, so that the sun comes back out, all the monsters get turned to ash, right? Well, a lot of people said this is an FTL feat because they measured the disco ball and then measured the sun and was like, okay, based on this, how far is the disco ball from the sun? That's how far they traveled in that amount of time, ergo FTL. This is stupid. It makes absolutely no sense to try to calculate how strong people are or how fast people are or any statistics whatsoever in an animated show, especially an animated show as stylized as the Powerpuff Girls, by using measurements on a fucking hand-drawn image like this and then calculate it like realistically. That doesn't make sense. Because nothing that is shown on screen is the literal size of anything. It's a representation of the size of something. When you see the Powerpuff Girls flying into the city, you can see them as compared to the whole city. The city looks like it's like so small, but then once they go into the city, it's huge. There's massive streets, everything. There's a big difference. When you see the sun, it's not the normal size of the sun. When you see this disco ball, it looks really tiny when they fly to it, but then once they get to it, it's like the size of a freaking moon. Everything is representative. And this isn't just the case for Powerpuff Girls. If you look over to say like the last feed I was talking about with Superman, where he goes over to the sun and the eye is like does the pulse thing, yeah, all that. When Superman flies over to the sun and he's like just like flying right near it but not at it, the sun is not the size the sun would actually be while he's near it. It's smaller because they have to draw it in a way that it all fits on the screen at the same time. Do we assume that in the DCAU, the sun is smaller than it would be in our universe because they drew it smaller? No, it's a fucking drawing. The sizes aren't even consistent in multiple shots. They change with each one because it's drawn by a dude by hand, not by like mathematical AI or anything. It's like they're going to be different. There are some scenes where the girls are flying around and they got shadows underneath them. Those shadows are just like circles. They aren't shaped like they should be shaped like the girls. They're just circular shadows for some reason. And then the very next scene, it'll go back to them and they're still flying, same place, no time has passed, now the shadows are gone. Why? Because it was drawn by hand. It makes no sense to try and find power levels this way. It works the same way with the strength levels, right? At one point in the show, the Powerpuff Girls are challenged to a bunch of different competitions to the like equivalent to, I guess, the Justice League or the Avengers in the Powerpuff Girls universe. And during one of the competitions, one of the dudes rips the top half of a mountain off and lifts it above his head. Now, for the top half of a mountain, and they do say it's the top half of a mountain in the show, it looks pretty small. It's not that big. It looks like a big rock. But this is stated to be a mountain. And then the background, you can see other mountains that look just like it. And then in that episode, they say that this is Mount Everest. That's not half of Mount Everest that he's holding above his head. So are we to assume he lifted the top half of Mount Everest, or are we to take it literally as how it's drawn, which, by the way, it changes sizes multiple times between shots. So, like, what exactly do we do here? I'm just saying it doesn't work to actually measure things like this. Not in a fucking drawing. It just doesn't make sense. So, having said that, how fast or strong or whatever are the Powerpuff Girls? Well, speed-wise, we know they are, in fact, FTL, just not in the way that they say. The people who say they're FTL because they calculate, it's like, oh, it's thousands of times the speed of light because that's how fast it would have to be to get almost to the sun nearly instantly. You're basically getting to the sun faster than light would, like considerably faster than light would, and that's where the calculation comes from. But in reality, we know they're FTL because there's a whole episode where the girls decide to race each other. And they fly so fast that they go above the speed of light, and this has them travel forward in time. This is based on Einstein's whole theory about if you were to travel over light speed, you can travel through time. That's what this is. This episode directly shows how difficult it is for the girls to go over light speed, and they do successfully. So yes, they are faster than light, but it takes a lot of effort in order to do that. It's not what these people think it is, where they just booted over to this fucking disco ball in the sky and it was FTL and it was no problem. If they were traveling FTL when they went to the disco ball, they would have went back in time, because it's already confirmed that that would happen earlier in the show when they do go over FTL. This would make them considerably faster than any of the marks. Also, unlike the marks, where the marks are actually considerably slower in combat speed, the Powerpuff Girls aren't. They are consistently shown to be able to fight just as fast as they can fly. Unlike Mark, they are always shown to be blitzing the shit out of people, tying them up before they even know what's going on. Like, very few characters in Powerpuff Girls are even capable of fighting against the girls, unless they're like giant kaiju or him or something who's literally Satan. They blitz people constantly, unlike the marks, who are shown in the Invincible War to struggle fighting normal human people with normal reaction speeds. They're definitely faster to some degree, but it's not to the point that they instantly blitz all humans everywhere. That's not shown. Powerpuff Girls, it is. In terms of strength, the bitch rips off the top half of a mountain. Like, holding the top half of the mountain above her head is impressive. I would argue that that's more impressive than the glacier thing. But ripping it off the top when it's not actually detached, like it's a full mountain, and then you go halfway down, and you tear the top half off the bottom half, that is so far beyond anything that Mark has ever done, even close. There's no way any of the Marks can do anything near that. That's impressive. And yes, I know Buttercup isn't the one that ripped that top half of the mountain off. It was that British superhero dude, I'm forgetting his name. But the episode does make it clear that Buttercup is physically stronger than him, because she wins the competition. And the whole point of these competitions is to see who's better, and they come to the conclusion the Powerpuff Girls beat them in every single category, including the strength category, so this is something that she should be able to do. Overall, Powerpuff Girls are stronger and faster. I don't even really have to go on and talk about any of their other powers. Sometimes they have laser eyes. At one point, Buttercup has shadow powers. Like, all three of the Powerpuff Girls decide to not be Powerpuff Girls anymore, and they want to go be their own solo heroes. And they start developing new powers based on the new heroes they want to be. Like, Buttercup wants to be a kind of Batman-like superhero who goes out at night and beats people up, and she just acquires new shadow powers, which heavily implies that all of the Powerpuff Girls can literally just develop new superpowers based on how they feel like fighting or whatever in that particular moment. There are also certain episodes where they just randomly use a power they never use ever again, just for a particular situation. So yeah, I think they can actually evolve power. But again, that's not really necessary. They're way faster, they're way stronger, and there's 3 of them. They can go anywhere on Earth instantly, wipe out the Marks before they can even react, take them out, and boom, it'll be done. If Superman would do it in about 40-45 minutes, the Powerpuff Girls would literally do this shit in like 5, 10 maybe. But that's going to be all from me. Hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share, and join the membership. Remember, you join the membership, you get videos early. And always remember, y'all stay safe out there, you hear?